Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be a little bit messy, but I'm going to try to streamline it as best I can. And I do want to say that there's a couple of ways of thinking about take-along cards, and the way I'm going to think about this video is mainly by focusing on chronology. So firstly, I'm going to look at the changes made to the front of the cards over the years, and then I'm going to talk about the changes made to the rear of the cards. Starting with a 2002 Thomas. Now, what I want you to pay attention to on this card, and the main changes that occurred, is the logo and the picture. Okay. Now, the main thing I want you to pay attention to with the logo is the hyphen, because the hyphen does change as well as the color of the logo. So this is a 2002 Thomas card, and this would go unchanged I think till 04. I'm not quite sure about that, but I know in 04, 05 they would update it to a different style, which we shall see soon. But before then, I want to talk about internationals briefly. Internationals popped onto the scene I believe about 04, 05, and as you can see the hyphen is gone and the font is actually red and yellow. You'll see soon that this was a bit of a weird thing that the Internationals did, and is actually an inversion of a later logo, which I'll mention when we get there. Also note that the image is now zoomed out. Now, I'm not quite sure about Learning Curve or RC2's international division and what they were allowed to do and whatnot, but they tended to have a degree of autonomy when designing character cards, at least for Take Along. There are some interesting ones, for instance. The single Clarabelle card, which, for reference, ran the entire length of the take-along range. They never got the 2-pack in the UK or Europe, which is fairly typical. I mean, a couple of other characters didn't get 2-packs either, that were sold basically exclusively as that here. For that, actually, Clarabelle and Annie are a bit of an anomaly, because they were sold individually in the US and Australia and other English-speaking provinces. But what's odd is that the international one seems to have been a bit more cohesive in this case. The picture used on the front of the card is the same picture they would draw the Annie solo card from. And they would also use this picture for the Annie and Clarabelle card globally. What's weird then is the fact that the US market, and the Australian market and all those English-speaking markets, would receive a Clarabelle card that looked like this. It is a bit jarring going between the Season 3 promotional image of the card, especially when you've got these in a book and you've got them ordered, like a folder, to a 2005 promotional image that's not even really the same angle. I think it's the same station, but not the same angle, and it is quite jarring. Speaking of jarring, though, internationals were also known for that, and Iron Arry and Iron Bert have got to take the biscuit for being the most jarring. Iron Arry and Bert were used just promotional images of their take-along characters on a blue background. And it looks like a card. Yeah, look, these are interesting, but they also probably are one of the worst looking character cards they ever did. Bill and Ben, for instance, despite being in a similar boat, actually got pretty decent individual cards. Today, these are fairly hard to find as well. It's really quite a rarity. A lot of these international ones sort of get forgotten, because they were sold to a market that was really rather small and isn't really vocal, especially in modern Thomas discussion. Moving right along, this is your 04-05 style with a revised take-along logo. The hyphen is now gone, you have a trademark, and this style would remain in use till about 07, but not on all characters. You see, some characters would update to this design. You'll note that the nameplate has changed a bit. You've gone from a red border to a more silvery one. You'll note the take-along logo is now yellow and red. Like I said, the internationals are just an inversion of this color palette, which is actually a very smart choice and makes them very easy to identify in a lot. This style would be around from 06 to 07 before being relatively quickly updated to this style, the 07 to 09 style. Now, firstly, I'll say that 09s are obscenely hard to find, both in international and in US style. Most of what you're going to find from this period is going to be 07s and 08s. There are a few different variants of this card, but they're not really worth mentioning. It mainly just comes down to changes in the way the border's laid out. I mean, this one's a US one. You can see where the border is. This one's an international. This is a revised international. I mean, the border's just slightly different. I'm not even really sure if these constitute a different variant, to be honest, and I don't think I classify them as one in the document, which will be linked below, where you can use that as a checklist. Moving along from the fronts of the cards, let's look at the rears. The rears are actually probably the parts that are a bit more interesting. This is a 2002 rear, and it is very similar to an 03 rear. Basically, they are the same except for a year change. 04 gets interesting, and I should also mention that 02 characters never had 03 cards. 03 characters, well, never had 02 cards, obviously. But neither 02 or 03, from what I'm aware, would get this style of 04 card, which seems to be reserved for characters introduced in that year. I've only ever seen this on characters like Bill and Ben. It's a fairly hard to find card, and it's a bit weird because you have the year duplicated twice. I kind of get what they were going for here, but it just looks a bit odd. Speaking of odd, this is an international rear, and it's a bit of a mess. Now, these come in two styles. I think the earlier ones have GB for English. They have Deutsch, French. What the fuck was that saying? They got Deutsch, French, Spanish, and Italian, and they list the Thomas website as being -RC2. Later ones would switch to just saying Thomas and Friends down the bottom, and would switch between languages. This handle, for instance, has Dutch on it as well as Italian, although some cards just before Sir Handle just have Dutch and not Italian. It's a bit odd. I generally tend to believe that the Italian ones came first, the Dutch ones came second, and then the combined came last, before they updated to the final style. Also note, this is what an 04 looks like. As I said, the hyphen is gone, and this style of card went till 07, which is pretty much the same story with this one. This is the 06 card with the font, like I mentioned. This also went to 07, although in the case of both of these, I don't believe the same character would have had both cards running at the same time. It's more like they kept one card going instead of updating it. Duck, for instance, has an 07 card in this style. James, from what I'm aware, doesn't. Both ranges would get their cards updated in... Both regions would get their cards updated in 07. This is what a normal US one, America, Australia one looks like. This is what an international one looks like. You still have the same languages, I believe, as on the Sir Handle. So you've got... But they've changed it a bit, so that instead of saying GB, it does say EN, which is probably a bit more accurate. French, Deutsch, Italian, Dutch, and Spanish. And that's it. This is actually really just meant to be a very quick video. Just basically to indicate to you what some of the differences are. So I will be planning to do a bit more of an in-depth one, looking at some of the more oddities later in the pipeline once I have more time. But either way, thank you all for watching. Feel free to check the links in the description. And bye for now.